Hi, I'm Braddock District Supervisor James Walkinshaw. Thanks for tuning in to Braddock Voices, where we talk to Braddock District and Fairfax County residents and leaders who are working to make our wonderful community even better. To stay up to date on future episodes, community news, and local events, sign up for the Braddock District email list. You can contact us at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov to subscribe. And before we introduce today's guest, we have another animal spotlight. This is an animal that is available for adoption at the Fairfax County Animal Shelter. And today's animal is Chloe the cat. Chloe is a 12-year-old white and brown-coated cat. The animal shelter mentions that her nose has a little heart shape on it. She was surrendered because her home was too chaotic for her, and she showed her displeasure at the time by not using the litter box. Chloe is a nice and quiet cat who wants a nice, quiet home. She comes from a house where another cat was bullying her, and she recently had a UTI. Now that she has received medication and is no longer near her bully, she's feeling much better. Chloe loves to be brushed, enjoys meeting new people, but does not want to live with young kids. She would probably do best in a home without other pets because she wants all of your attention. If you're interested in meeting Chloe, call the animal shelter at 703-830-1100. If Chloe has found a new home by the time you call, don't worry. The animal shelter can still help you find your future best friend. And with that, I want to introduce today's guest. We are very fortunate to have Brittany Vera. Brittany is Fairfax County's Child Witness to Domestic Violence Coordinator working within the Department of Family Services. Brittany, welcome.
Thank you.
And Brittany and I are going to talk about a new county initiative, Step Up for Kids, as well as the overall impact of COVID-19 on domestic violence issues in Fairfax County. But first, Brittany, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been with the county for going on 10 years. I have a master's in clinical social work, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I started my career with the county working actually as a volunteer in the Supervised Visitation program over in the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. And I like to call it the 2-year interview process. I was eventually hired for a position over there.
Tell us, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
sure, go ahead.
Tell the listeners, what is the Supervised Visitation program?
Great question. The Supervised Visitation program is a program for families who are often involved in custody issues, and there are safety concerns about whether or not it's okay for a parent to be alone with a child. A lot of these families, there's concerns about domestic violence and just the safety of and the appropriateness of a parent being alone. Oftentimes there's protective orders that prevent parents from being alone with their kids. So the Supervised Visitation program is a great solution for families. It's offered on a sliding scale. Right now they're doing remote services, but they have a great staff, and I think it's been around since at least 2008 or 2009. And so they've just grown exponentially. I was very fortunate to run a program. We had 2 programs at one point, and my program focused exclusively on families where there was domestic violence. Okay. So families do need a court order to access that program, but just know if that's something, if you're experiencing domestic violence or you have concerns about the safety of the other parent with the children, if you're in court, it is something that you could ask for.
So I interrupted you. You
That's
started
okay.
volunteering there.
I started volunteering there, and I worked there for about 8.5 years working directly with families. And it was a great job because I got to see firsthand what families experienced when there's domestic violence in the home and they decide they need to separate. And it was just really rewarding and fulfilling to be able to help families connect safely and for children to stay connected to their parents in healthy ways. And then eventually the position I hold now opened up, and I came over to Domestic and Sexual Violence Services and took this job as the Child Witness to Domestic Violence Coordinator.
And tell us about the new initiative that you're working on, relatively new initiative, Step Up for Kids.
Yeah, so Step Up for Kids started Somewhere around 2000, it was fall of 2018, but it's still relatively new, as you said. And it is a group of people from across the community, both nonprofit and county agencies, that have come together to try to work to create sustainable goals and objectives in our community related to children and domestic violence. When children experience domestic violence, it has a long-lasting impact on them. And so Step Up for Kids came about because people at a high level, such as yourself, members of our Council to End Domestic Violence, saw the need to create some services and training for children who'd experienced DV, training for the people that work with them. And so that's what the coalition is there to do. We're working around community engagement and raising awareness of how everyone can help make a difference for a child. We're working with professionals across community organizations and county agencies on how to better recognize domestic violence when it's happening and how to get families the help and the resources that they need. We're creating services and trying to implement some prevention programs and all sorts of different type of stuff. So it's been really exciting.
And as Brittany mentioned, this is an issue that is an important one to me. I've been a member of Fairfax County's Council to End Domestic Violence. I'm currently the chair of the Council to End Domestic Violence, and I got engaged in it because I was working as a mentor to two young kids. They're not so young anymore, but two young kids who were child witnesses to domestic violence. So I saw the impact that it had on them, the impact of that trauma and the challenges it created for them, but also their resilience and their families' resilience when they had the right support systems in the county and in the community. So I think this is an incredibly important initiative, and it's an aspect of domestic violence that maybe doesn't get as much attention, the long-term impacts on children. Tell us, what are some of those impacts? What do you expect to see? Obviously, every situation is different and every child is different, but what are some of the challenges that being a child witness to domestic violence can create?
So I think some of the challenges have kind of been our culture historically has thought, if a child is out of sight, they're out of mind. And if what they don't see can't hurt them and it's not going to affect them long term. And thanks to a lot of research in the area of trauma, we know that's just not true anymore. We know that if a baby is sleeping in a crib and there's fighting and there's violence or scary things happening around that baby is going to have really long-lasting impacts that are going to show itself, as they're going to preschool. They might be aggressive with other preschoolers, or they are withdrawn and sad. Every child handles it differently. As they get to be an older child, maybe they have difficulty with their peers. They're getting into fights a lot at school. Or conversely, like maybe they want to be an overachiever, right, and never do anything wrong so that they keep everyone around them happy and they're not getting in trouble. But it takes an emotional toll on them. So it really affects them across their lifetime. And then as they get to be adults, they have a hard time with relationships. They're more likely to be victims of, let's say, teen dating violence, or they're more likely to use violence in relationships as teens, as young adults. They might be involved, unfortunately, with the criminal justice system even. So the impacts can be far-reaching.
It's a really profound insight that you started with, and it sounds like the research is definitive on this point, that children, including infants, including babies, are absorbing everything that's going on in the home.
Right.
Including violence and negative issues that are going on in the home. So you've laid out some of the long-term impacts and challenges that it can create. What is Step Up for Kids going to do to address those issues?
So what Step Up for Kids is going to do to address those issues is that we are really trying to educate folks in the community, people who are friends and neighbors. Maybe they're a sports coach, or they're a Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop leader. Maybe they are just that person in the neighborhood that, everyone, the kids stop by and say hello on the way home, or they're greeting, kids as they get off the school bus. And so they have a potential to make a difference in a child's life. It might not seem like it, but we like to say, we had a saying in supervised visitation, you've got to listen to a child tell you 100 nothings before they tell you something of importance. And so it's when children really start to recognize something is wrong and I need help, that they're going to go to those trusted adults who have been consistent in caring and listening to them. So we're just trying to raise people's awareness of what they might be seeing, how they can help, often letting people know that a child's behavior is just the tip of the iceberg and there's a lot more happening beneath it. And so it's important to kind of ask those questions and let a child know that you're there to listen. But we're also trying to get training into the hands of people who work with children, but they're just not often aware of domestic violence. People that are working in daycares or in SAC centers, or who run daycares out of their homes, or they're like I mentioned, the athletic coaches. They're kind of on the forefront of my mind because so many kids are back in sports right now. And so it's not that they necessarily get a lot of training around this, like a teacher might or a social worker in a school might, but they still have that big, important part to play in a child's life.
So the key is this kind of constellation of caring, responsible adults around the children. Now, setting aside COVID, obviously the school system and teachers and counselors and coaches there would play this kind of role in a lot of cases. One of the tragedies of COVID is with children not physically in school. We don't know how many of those domestic violence situations or child abuse situations are going unreported. But this group of caring adults who can establish relationships with children, whether it's the Boy Scouts or the soccer coach or the ballet teacher, or just a friend in the neighborhood, having that relationship with some level of trust. But then what? If you are one of those adults, what is it that you need to be looking for? How do you identify a situation that could be reflective of a violence in the home and not just, a kid maybe having a bad day?
So the biggest thing I always encourage people to look for is a change in the child's behavior. That's going to be your first indicator that something's going on. Maybe this child is usually really outgoing and gregarious and rambunctious and they're everybody's friend, and now all of a sudden they're withdrawn, they're shy, they don't really want to talk. Children who are experiencing domestic violence are often afraid of letting people know what's happening in their home because that's the message they're being given of, this is nobody's business but our own, and you're not to tell anyone about this. Other people are not safe. They might have even been told, look, you're going to be taken away from us, by the government if someone knows that this is happening. And so there's a real fear around disclosing. Sometimes you might see a child sleeping a lot more in class if they're in school, or they're maybe not performing on the athletic field like they used to be. But we also encourage adults to kind of look for and listen for interactions with parents as well. If you try to broach a child's behavior or something that's happening with the child with the parent, if you're talking to a survivor, you might hear kind of a lot of explanations as to why that is. You might hear even a survivor say, well, it's my fault, I'm a bad parent. They're taking responsibility for, what's happening in the home because they've been told the abuse is their fault. Or you might hear a parent who's causing harm saying things like, well, this is all the other parents' fault, and if they would just get it together and be a better parent and do all the things I told them to do, we wouldn't have this problem.
And so then what? So if you're one of those adults and you observe a change in behavior, a change in performance in school or on the athletic field, and you have a concern, but you're not sure, what do you do next? What's the next step that you should take?
You can always ask. And you can always say to the child, hey, I've noticed X, Y, and Z. I've noticed, it doesn't seem like your heart's in it like it used to be, or it's harder for you to take a test or to sit still in the classroom. Is there anything you want to talk about? You know, a lot of kids have had hard things happen at home, and you can just frame it generally like that. Is there anything that you'd like to share with me? Is there a way that I can help you? And a child probably isn't going to come out and tell you right away, but at least you've opened the door for them. If you've seen other things happening, maybe interactions with parents that lead you to be concerned specifically about domestic violence, we have a 24-hour domestic and sexual violence hotline, and it's there not just for survivors or victims, it's there for people who want to help them. And so you can call that number. It's 703-360-7273. And it's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so it's a resource for caring, supportive people in the lives of children as well.
And I think that's a really great point. Brittany knows I'm a passionate reminder of the hotline for people. I invested a lot of time in reminding people about the hotline, but it's important in this context because I think for a lot of people listening, they might be thinking to themselves, okay, if I identify a change in behavior, I have a concern, maybe I have a conversation with the child that leaves me feeling like maybe there is something unsafe happening, but I'm not sure. How do I decide to take it to that next level? What do I do next? I'm not sure. I don't want to maybe create a problem.
Right.
But the answer is call the hotline, and you can talk confidentially if you want to an expert, and you can share what you know and develop a plan to move forward from there.
Yeah, and they'll give you a great plan to kind of come up with ways that you can support and ask questions if that's something you feel comfortable doing. They will help you think of even like some ways that you could safety plan, right? So like if I were to have a friend that were experiencing domestic violence, I would say, okay, our code word is going to be, let's get takeout, right? And then you send me that text and I know I need to do something to help you, right? I need to call someone. I need to come, ask if you want to go for a walk and ring your doorbell, like do something to kind of interrupt what might be happening, because sometimes that's all it takes. And our hotline is really there to help people. Some people think they're calling and reporting.
Right.
You can't see my air quotes, but reporting domestic violence, and that's not the case. No one's going to send someone to your house to investigate.
Right.
This is about if someone wants to stay in a relationship, helping them stay safely. If they want to leave a relationship, it's helping them leave safely.
And the important thing in the context of child witness issues, is you don't need to figure it out on your own what
Correct.
to do next. You don't need to be up late at night Googling it, trying to figure out the best approach on your own. You can talk to someone who can help you work through that, someone who's knowledgeable about these kind of situations. So we know what Step Up for Kids is trying to achieve. It's raising this awareness among in the community to be aware of the children that are around you and in your life and what's going on with them, and to know some of the signs and take action if necessary. What specifically are we doing through the Step Up for Kids initiative to accomplish that?
Great question. So we have just recently created and released some short videos around different adversities, we'll call them, that children experience. And they're meant to be very quick, easy to watch videos, both in English and Spanish, that kind of explain issues like domestic violence or child abuse and neglect, explain what they are, how they're impacting kids, and most importantly, how people can help. So these are, great education tools. If you're scrolling through Facebook, I'm sure, hopefully, if you follow Fairfax County Department of Family Services or your Braddock District page, people will see them. But we are also putting posters up around the community now that people are going to be back in places and spaces. We're putting them in schools. We're putting them maybe at gyms, anywhere where we can get them really, where kids gather and adults might see them. And those posters kind of help people understand things that they can do to make a difference. It directs them to a website where they can learn more about the actions that they can take.
Great. So let's broaden our conversation a little bit to domestic violence issues in general, and we can talk a little bit about COVID and the impact that has had. But first, can you define domestic and intimate partner violence for us? Tell us the broad definition.
Sure. So the broad definition, a lot of people think that when they hear domestic violence or intimate partner violence, they're thinking physical abuse. But really, domestic violence is anything. It's a series of patterns and behaviors in relationships that are used to exert power and control over the other partner. So it doesn't have to be just physical. It could be emotional, and there's often an emotional component to it where it's kind of emotional, psychological abuse. It could be verbal abuse. It could be financial. It could be sexual. It could be use of culture, someone's identity to cause harm, or it could even be using children, like threatening to take children away if someone were to leave, or saying they're going to call Child Protective Services on them if they don't do what the offender or perpetrator might want them to do, the person who's causing harm.
Got it. And talking about COVID and the impact of COVID on domestic violence in the county, what are some of the trends that we're seeing? What are observations? What are the new challenges in domestic violence prevention because of the pandemic?
Yeah, so this is a great question. This has kind of become something that a lot of people in the media and the UN Organization of Women are calling a shadow pandemic. The rates of domestic violence are increasing significantly. And in the early days of the pandemic, when everyone was home together, people were not able to reach out for help like they normally could. And we were really concerned about what might be happening behind closed doors because everyone was just in their homes all the time. And they had a hard time calling or leaving or seeking the help that they might normally need. So we're still kind of figuring out how our local trends match up with national trends. We've definitely had some periods where we've had really high call volume, and there's other times where it's been pretty quiet. But the calls that we have been seeing are definitely complex. People are dealing with a lot of stressors in their lives, not just the violence. There's also concerns about mental health and substance use, which we also know are on the rise as people try to cope with the effects of the pandemic. They're experiencing financial hardship. They've lost jobs. They don't have food to eat. So it's really just a whole constellation of stressors. And it's not to say that mental health or substance use cause domestic violence. They definitely don't. But they're often happening at the same time for a lot of families.
So we know that these stressors are increasing. People are more likely, at least maybe until recently, to be isolated in their homes, perhaps isolated with an abuser. And it's kind of a challenge to get the data because maybe you would have called the hotline, but if you're stuck in a home or an apartment with your abuser, that might be a hard thing to do.
Right.
How many cases, there's no way to know how many cases or situations have gone unreported that maybe otherwise would have been reported through teachers and counselors at school who are aware of it. So real challenges just in terms of knowing the scope of the problem in the midst of the pandemic.
Right.
But also I suspect challenges in delivering services to people who need them. Can you talk about that a little bit and about what Fairfax County has done to try to deliver domestic violence prevention services to people who need them during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do, like many county agencies, we have something we call assistance from a distance. And I will just put a quick plug, our hotline right now is only like a phone hotline where you can call, but there are national hotlines. If people feel more comfortable and safe texting, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline and you text LOVE IS to 22522. But some of the things that we've done on a local level is we've turned all of our services virtual. So our advocates who provide kind of like that initial intervention and discussions about safety planning to survivors and how to stay safe or how to support a loved one, they're completely virtual right now. I believe they're doing phone appointments. They will go to court with people who want that support, and they're doing that all virtually right now. Our counseling services, They offer free counseling to survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and they're doing all of that through Zoom telehealth, and trying to make that as safe and as accessible as possible. And similarly, our ADAPT program that provides services and intervention to people who have caused harm with violence, they're also virtual right now. So all of our staff has been incredibly creative and really trying to pivot quickly and respond to the needs of the community. Thankfully, our hotline was already virtual, so it never stopped operating.
Great, thank you. We are approaching the end of our time, and I'll ask a question that we've already answered, but it's important to repeat. Brittany, what should someone do if they or someone they know is experiencing domestic violence?
Well, the most important thing you can do if someone comes out and discloses domestic violence is, of course, believe them and validate their experience and ask how they want your support. Let them be the decider of what help is going to look like in their life and to make their own choices. And they might not know, but that's okay. You can think through it together. Have that hotline number ready. If someone's not willing to call for themselves, offer to call with them or call for them and ask how you can learn more to support them. And I really just want to encourage folks to remind them that just because someone has adversity, domestic violence, trauma of some sort in their life, it's not the predictor of the rest of their life. It's the people that are going to come alongside and support them, and it's the people like you that volunteer and engage with kids. We know that the more supportive, caring adults a child has in their life, the more likely they are to thrive and be resilient and kind of be able to grow from this experience and experience some resiliency.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. You've been a great guest.
Thank you.
Brittany Vera, Fairfax County's Child Witness to Domestic Violence Coordinator, who is spearheading the new Step Up for Kids initiative. I want to thank you all for listening to Braddock Voices, where we talk to Braddock District and Fairfax County residents and leaders who are working to make our wonderful community even better. To stay up to date on future episodes, sign up for our email list. Contact us at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov. and we'll send those updates directly to your inbox. Thanks for listening.